Well, hello. Welcome to South Fellowship Church. It's something I get to say every Sunday morning. I'm really glad that this space can be used to serve some of you. Like Jake said, my name is Bjorklund. I have been serving here at South for 10 years and 8 years full time. I was born and raised in East Africa, so I'm a missionary kid, and I went to school in Chicago, Moody Bible Institute. I actually studied preaching. I didn't actually have any imagination that I was going to be a full-time worship pastor. I thought that's what I was going to do in high school, but then sort of I thought bigger things, and then suddenly about 3 years into my time leading worship full-time here, it dawned on me, wait a second, how did this happen? I'm a full-time musician. I never thought this was a thing that was possible. So kind of cool. So I realized when Jake asked me to talk about longevity, I think part of the reason he asked me is he's like, I don't know a lot of worship leaders or even staff people at churches who've been at a place as long as you have. And obviously, most churches have one or two staff members that have been around longest or longer. There's one guy here at South who's been here longer than I have. His name's Dan. He's been here for almost 30 years. But then I'm the next. So 10 years is the next longest tenured staff member, and I've seen every single one of our staff members hired. I've seen people join the team. I've seen people leave the team over and over and over again in my time here. And I realized when Jake asked me to talk about longevity, I hope this isn't a kiss of death situation. I don't know if you've heard this story about the pastor was doing a series or something about humility and decided to sort of give an illustration of what humility looked like. And he had this old guy in his church who was just tremendously humble, and he gave him a pin that says most humble man in the church. And then after a few months he had to tell the guy to take that pin off because it's no longer effective as an illustration tool. So it feels a little bit dangerous for me to talk about longevity. I hope this isn't the last time I talk about longevity. But 10 years in and going strong. I've been here 8 years full time. And the question I have is, well, first of all, let's just start with a definition of longevity. It's a long duration of individual life, length of life, long continuance, permanence, durability. And the average length of time that a pastor is on staff in the United States is, according to some research, is 3.6 years. And some studies show that the average length of a worship pastor is closer to 2 years. And so that makes me, I guess, a little bit of an anomaly, and I won't do a little survey here, but to see if that's true for some of you. And I don't want this conversation to be one that produces guilt if you have bounced around a little bit. But I do want to offer some tips on how do you stay for the long haul. So we can just jump right in. I think one of the reasons, I guess one of the questions that I have to pose first before we dive into some tips is this: is longevity even desirable? What is it about staying in a place for a long period of time that might be desirable? Because maybe that isn't desirable. We even heard a little bit about finding alignment with the right team, not kicking against the goads. Like if you're in an unhealthy and toxic place or whatever, there may be some good reasons to leave. And maybe you've already encountered some of those reasons. So is longevity even something that we should seek for? And I think that the lyrics of this song give us just a hint at some of the reasons why longevity is a desirable thing. This is a song, Seasons by Hillsong. I'm just going to read these lyrics over you, and it sort of starts to hint at this. Like the frost on a rose, winter comes for us all. Oh, how nature acquaints us with the nature of patience. Wow. By the way, incredible lyric writing. And like a seed in the snow, I've been buried to grow, for your promise is loyal from seed to sequoia. Beautiful. I know, though the winter is long, even richer the harvest it brings, And though my waiting prolongs, even greater your promise for me like a seed, I believe that my season will come. So there's this song is illustrating a maturing, a transformation of life, and it's using all of these images from growth and plant life and stuff. And the reason that's a powerful illustration is because we see it in all spheres of life. We see it in plant life. We see it in the seasons that change. We see it. It seems to be that God has hardwired into creation itself and into us time and pace. And he's much more comfortable with taking his time than we might be. And then I love this bridge, because you can see my promise, even in the winter, because you're the God of greatness, even in a manger. For all I know of seasons is that you take your time. And listen to this. You could have saved us in a second. Instead, you sent a child. Wow, what a crazy idea. And we're starting to approach the season of Advent and Christmas. And have you ever wondered that? Like, God, when you're looking to transform me, when you desire for me to not be this kind of person, but instead to become this kind of person, why don't you just make it so now? What's up with the long haul kind of transformation that takes place? And it's just God's MO. He is much more patient than we are to seek transformation. So one of the reasons I think that longevity is a desirable thing is because it puts us into alignment with something that's unique about how God tends to do. Longevity aligns you with one of God's standard tools of transformation, patience. And not only does it align you with God's standard tool of transformation, your ministry is the same way. The people you shepherd are the same way. Patience is something that God loves to leverage to transform us. The hard seasons, the winter, like that song talks about, the beautiful seasons, the spring and the fall, the hot seasons, the summer, all of these are things that God is okay with taking his time on. I'll just quick share this passage. Preach the word, be ready to do it whether it's convenient or inconvenient. Correct, confront, encourage with patience and instruction. So another question is, what's the reason for the length of time that most people serve at a church? And if you've been in church ministry for any length of time, you're probably already starting to sense some of the reasons. So let me just share a couple of them, and then we'll actually start to get into the tips here in just a moment. Oops. I don't know how to use technology here, so. Okay, where'd my notes go? All right, there it is. Some of the reasons may include the week in and week out nature of this role. And a lot of jobs have monotony, right? But there's something about, well, think about it this way. If you're a worship leader or a tech director, your job is to put on a conference for 70, 1,000, however many people there are in your church, every weekend. You put on a conference with all of the trappings, lights and sound and preparation and order of service and all of those things. Like huge name conferences spend a year, 6 months to prepare all that stuff, and you do it every single weekend, and there's so many details, and Sunday is obnoxiously consistent. Am I wrong? Some of the other reasons, complaints of the congregation. You know, you come here, show up in your church, you're excited to serve, you've got gifts, you're passionate, and you want to care for people's souls through the medium of music, and then they start complaining, it's too loud, it's too soft, the lights are weird, you don't do enough hymns, you do too many hymns, you name it, there is a critique. And if you ever want a job that is not a bullseye target on your chest, do not become a worship pastor or a tech director. I mean, maybe the lead pastor is the one who gets the biggest target on him, but then it becomes the worship pastor and the tech director, maybe even sometimes more the tech director, if the person has the wherewithal to realize that some of the sound's coming from there. And it gets obnoxious, right? You're just trying to serve, you're trying to love them, and then they start to kick against it, right? Artistic frustration. Artistic frustration can be a reason that people burn out. You hear, when you start, you have this vision of what you're gonna sound like, and your team's gonna grow, and you're gonna be able to cultivate this new lead guitarist, and he's actually gonna be able to play those parts that you hear on the Bethel album. And then before you know it, you don't have the guitarist that weekend, you don't have a bass player, you've got tracks, but then people don't like the tracks because it feels, whatever it may be, and you never sound like the album. It's just so obnoxious, and then you just have this creative energy in you that you can't create alone, and you can't quite get your team to the level where it satisfies that itch as an artist, as a creative. That's another reason why people might move along. How about this? Identity. Identity, for a lot of creative people, and I think there's a lot more creative people even in the tech space than some might think. Yes, there's some who are more engineer types and they just like the details and that sort of thing, but it takes a unique kind of creativity to be in the tech space as well, because you have to understand the complexities of how this all works, and you have to be able to solve problems in creative ways, and on and on and on. But creative people tend to draw a ton of their identity from their craft. And if you combine that with the other thing about critique and people's opinions, it's a precarious role to be in. So that's another reason. Worship can lose its beauty. I don't know if you, before you started serving in some capacity in your church, worship, music, encountering God's presence through that means was like a vibrant part of your life, and then now, weeks or months in, suddenly it starts to lose its ability to usher you into the throne room because your click track is off and your drummer's not there, and oh no, how do I need to be able to shut it off, and how am I gonna do that without derailing the whole band, or a lighting cue doesn't work, or a cable's crackling, or all the ors that take place on any given Sunday, and it's obnoxious, and you haven't even had a moment to think about God. And you're like, I don't want this anymore. That's another reason why people tend to move on. Conflict with a team, conflict with the lead pastor, conflict with other team members. If you're a tech leader, conflict with the worship pastor or other musicians. Hey, I need more of this in my in-ears, or I need this, So I think you guys get the point. You can fill in the gap. I could go on all day long of the reasons why people don't stick it out in a specific place. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. Instead, I'm here to share some, I think I started with 88 reasons, and I added another one, so it's actually 9-ish tips for longevity. But what we talked about in the very beginning, longevity is a desirable thing because I think it's part of the way God works in the world. Transformation sometimes shows up instantaneously, and wow, that's great. But for some reason, God chooses to be obnoxiously slow in the way he transforms people's lives. And if we short circuit that, we never get to reap the harvest. If you ditch the process in the winter, you never get to see spring. All right? So that's why these tips hopefully will help you suffer long through the winter seasons. All right, tip number 1. All right. Oh, and by the way, before I get into all these are not ordered by priority. I couldn't I didn't have enough mental capacity to order these by priority. So there's not like one that's better than the other. But these are just things that I have figured out over the time. The music and tech can't be your driving passion. If it is, you need to dethrone it as soon as possible because it will crush your soul. If your driving passion is just the technology and just the music itself, then find somewhere where you can just do music and technology and you don't have to deal with people. And maybe you're not even dealing with anything related to humanity. But music and technology can't be your primary passion. And actually, one of the reasons I don't feel qualified to speak on this longevity thing is I think one of the biggest gifts, one of the reasons I've stuck it out for so long is this was never the case for me. And that's not because of anything I did. That's just because of the journey that God had me on. And when Jake asked me to do this was my only point. Like other than in high school, I thought I was going to be a worship pastor. And then I had that sort of gift taken away from me. It was sort of a supernatural thing. It was a long story I'm not going to get into. But I changed directions, and I thought I was going to preach, and I thought I was going to teach, and all of that sort of thing. And then this thing just sort of wiggled its way back into my life. And it literally was about 3 years in when I realized, I'm doing that thing that I wanted to do in high school, but it's not at the core of who I am. One of the things that drives me is communicating truth. And I just use melodies and harmonies and rhythms to do it instead of illustrations and stories most Sundays. But that has protected me in a lot of ways. But there's more to this. If you can get a reason, a why for what you do that is the size of the kingdom, then when everything's going horribly wrong in your specific space, you still have something to celebrate for. So I would encourage you to try to grow as a leader and a pastor. Jake talked about this in the very first session. He said churches want pastors. That will be a safeguard for you because if you silo yourself into music or you silo yourself into tech, there are going to be days when there's not enough joy there to sustain you. So instead, you need to find joy from the kids ministry that's killing it. And the kingdom of God is coming in the lives of kids. And you have a big enough vision for the entire congregation that you can find joy and satisfaction and meaning and purpose in that ministry. You need to find joy in a renovation that took place in your facility that you've been praying for and longing for or whatever it may be. You need to find joy in a couple other areas. For me, it's leadership. I love strategy meetings. I'm in on all of our directional sort of conversations, these types of things. And I find so much joy. And then I also lead worship on the side. The tech stuff that I do video production, I do graphic design, I do all sorts of other things. And these things help me not be siloed into a space that can be soul-sucking at times. All right. I can't get lost in all of these because I do want to get you at lunch on time. So let's see. Let's move on. I could talk about all these forever. But let vision and mission capture you. And this is going to be a sort of a two-part one. This is a way of me getting 10 into 9 tips. But this is a tail end on that same idea of letting something bigger capture your heart, but it's also a tip on how to engage leadership, leading up and leading down. If interactions with a lead pastor or an elder board or all of those sorts of things, I think one of the things that helped me early on was I read this little pamphlet in high school that our worship pastor gave me. I started leading worship in high school, and he gave me this little pamphlet by Chuck Smith's associate pastor. I think that's what it was. I can't find it. I don't know where this is anymore. I remember almost nothing from it, but the title was How to Be an Associate Pastor. And I read this. He wanted me to read it for some reason. And the one thing I remembered was your goal should be to download the vision and mission so clearly in your mind and your heart that you could articulate as good as the leader does. And then to do that with everyone you have influence under you. The reason that's really a helpful tip is that if you can articulate and get yourself intimately familiar with all of the different strategies in the church and where the pastor is leading and where God is moving the community to, then it enables you to celebrate something beyond your area of ministry. And it enables you to say, I'm not going to fight for this budget because actually at a bigger level, this ministry needs that budget more than I do. And your celebrations becomes decentralized off of just your thing. It also will increase the gratitude of your leadership. I can't tell you how beautiful it is for a lead pastor to be able to say, I can trust so-and-so because sometimes I think they understand the vision better than I do. Or for you to cut off someone at the past, like I want to ask the lead pastor about this thing, and you can cut him off in the hallway and say, you know what? He gets plenty of questions. I know the answer to this question because I am intimately familiar with the vision and the strategy of this church. All right, moving on. I could probably do a talk on each one of these, but have a kingdom reason for why you do, not a preference reason. Why? Well, that's not a good sentence. Anyway, have a kingdom reason. So this was one of the things that I learned before I started here at South, because my previous role, I was starting to have some conflict with one of my subordinates. I was a leader in a mission agency, and I was starting to have some conflict and some tension. And then right around that time, I was part-time here at South, leading worship on the weekends, and then the lead pastor started asking me every single week in our planning meeting if I could go full-time. And about 9 months later, I started to think, there's this tension here, and I was going to have to travel some more for the other organization, and that wasn't working. We were about to have a baby. I'm married and have two kids, and I just didn't think I could travel more. And there's a bunch of reasons why I started to consider moving full-time and changing jobs. But I had a wise person tell me, Aaron, you cannot run from conflict into a worship pastor job. That is the worst idea ever. And so it took me 4 or 5 months of serious praying, because I knew I was going from a very low pressure leadership role to a big fat target on my chest every single weekend with genre and volume and lights and all of these things that every single person on the planet seems to have an opinion about. And if I was going to come into that role, I needed to have some deeper strength. And the way I did that was each decision, I try to do this, and I don't do it perfectly. I want a kingdom reason for why I do everything. That way, when someone attacks my thing, my idea, or my decision, I can then say, God, we talked about this. We talked about this, and I think I heard from you, and I think we're good, right? And it was something that protected me from instantly becoming self-protective in that moment. It allowed me to have the humility to actually listen to the critique. And it also allowed me to have a really well thought out answer for every single complaint. That was huge for me. In fact, this 2 or 3 months into me going full time, I actually did a little breakout session on a Sunday after service, and I said, come on out, I'm gonna show you all of my philosophy of ministry and worship and why I do the things that I do, and you're gonna have an opportunity to ask me questions. And the reason I did that was because I knew there were complaints, and if I created a forum for them to actually complain, I had the confidence, because I'd worked so hard with the lead pastor and in prayer to try and figure out a reason why we had the volume where we had it, why we chose the songs we chose, why, and that I had confidence in my relationship with God that I could stand on that. And the end result of that is I actually won over. I knew that there was going to be maybe a few young people, some older folks who were wanting to answer, why this, why that. I finished presenting it. I opened it up for Q&A, and I didn't have a single question. And I knew several of the people in the room had come to complain. but I'd already answered their question, and it was a kingdom answer. And it may not have been the right answer always, but these were people who loved Jesus, and they could see a young leader who was trying to talk to God about everything. So, a couple examples of that: volume, genre, lights, liturgy, on and on and on. Have a why for everything. If you saw Jake's tech tour video of this space, we have a why for why the stage is here and not here. We have a why for why the chairs are situated in this arced pattern. We have a why for why we decided to put LED lights out here. We wanted to start to break the barrier between stage and congregation, and why not make the entire room a lighting scape rather than on and on and on and on. And that way, when people approach me, I have an answer. By the way, having a kingdom reason for what you do will also cause you to change your opinion. And it will make you make decisions that you wouldn't naturally make. For example, song selection. I grew up in East Africa. I almost never get to experience worship the way my soul wants to experience worship. I would much rather have a big old gospel choir up here and some way better, more interesting rhythms. If I'm honest, I would oftentimes much prefer this song over this song. But I decide because another example of this is, do you tend to choose songs that fit the season of life that you're in and not songs that fit the season of life that you're not in? Every single Sunday, when the congregation comes to the room, there are some people who are in winter, some people are in summer. And if you don't sing songs that give them musical content to express their joy and adoration in a season of summer, because you're in the winter, then you're not serving a congregation. So you have to have a why for the songs you choose. And that why needs to be way bigger than you. It has to be kingdom-sized. So I have to consciously tell myself, you know what, this is one of my favorite songs in this season. I'm really in a dry spot, and this song just ministers to me. And I already did it last week, and our set list is too heavy, and someone in the room has got to sing a song of joy. And I'm not feeling it, but it's not about me, it's about the kingdom reason. And so I'm gonna sing a song that's bubbly and fun and feels like it's surface even though I'm not there, okay? I'm going, starting to preach, but wouldn't naturally make, this also causes you, when someone shows up with a good reason, a better kingdom reason for the thing, oh man, it enables you to say, oh, you know what? Because it's not about my reason anyway, my personal preference, I agree, let's change it. This is a fun one. Learn to love the complainers. I'm serious. This is a shift. So when I first came to South, all I heard was there was an older demographic in the community, and they were saying, it's too loud, we don't do enough hymns. And then after being here, and you only get to see this if you stick around, by the way. After being here for a while, what I realized is the younger generation is silent and they exit. When they don't like something, they quietly leave. The older generation, because they have commitment to covenant community, they stay and they complain. And it is a gift to the community, because they are committed enough to the community to renovate it from the inside out. I think it's the younger generation who quietly disappear that doesn't have the guts or commitment to the community to stick around and change it from the inside out. That's such a travesty. And so now, when someone has it takes a tremendous amount of boldness to approach a worship pastor and say, you know what? Why is it so loud? I just like, oh, you know what? Thank you for staying. Thank you for talking to me, because I have a reason. And it's your grandkids. And it gives me an opportunity to do, because I understand the vision of the church intimately, it gives me a chance to convert someone who's frustrated, who may be disseminating that frustration among their friends, and make a champion out of them. And so there was an older lady when I first came, and she came to that seminar, and she became one of my biggest advocates. And she didn't like the songs we sang all the time, and she didn't like the volume. And she said to me, I want to go to a church that my grandkids would love to go to. And because I know that that's what you're trying to accomplish, and you also do hymns to care for my soul, and you see all of us, I trust you. And anytime I hear a complaint, I'm squashing it for you. And I'm 90, so no one can tell me that I don't have the opinion of the older generation. So love the complainers because they're staying. They're staying and they're renovating their community. How am I doing on time? Okay. What else do I got? Ask a 97-year-old prayer warrior to pray for you. So there was this season here when we were growing like crazy. Lots of things were happening. I could hardly keep up with it. And it seemed like the pressure for excellence started to go higher and higher and higher. And I started to lose grip with my own confidence level. I was fearful of saying the wrong thing or singing the wrong note or making the wrong making a mistake. And for some reason, I took a place. Weirdly, I've always been fairly comfortable on a stage. I've never been really bashful about singing in front of people. That's not been one of the things I struggle with. And I started to stutter over my words when I was trying to pray and on and on and on. It's because of all the other things, the identity issues, the on and on and on and on. And then I went and I had an opportunity to film an interview with this 97-year-old prayer warrior in our church community. And she said, how can I be praying for you? And I said, you know what? I'm really struggling here. I'm terrified to step on that stage. And I don't know why. I miss the guy who didn't even think about himself, but just sort of was young and stupid and naive and just got up there and did his thing and loved Jesus and on and on and on. And I wish I could go back to that. Can you pray for me? That prayer request was one of the most transformative things I ever asked for because she prayed me out of that place. And I felt it like I can't even tell you. Prayer works, especially with this lady. I mean, she's seen miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. And I'm like, okay, I want this lady praying for me. And that vulnerability and the willingness to say that. And so for some reason, during that season, she's praying for me. And I started to get this desire each Sunday to sit in side stage here and just say, God, who do you say I am? And who do you think I am? And all of these types of prayers, and get a picture of God's face looking down on me and saying, Aaron, regardless of what happens, I love you and I believe in you. And I'd never done that before, but that was part of that journey as well. Hugely transformative for me to get a prayer warrior praying for me. But you have to be vulnerable in your prayer request, okay? All right. Trust that the Spirit sings when you can't. Did I put the passage up there? Yeah. This was huge for me. Romans 7:21 says this, so I find that in the law, this law at work, although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. This passage actually gave me a tremendous amount of freedom because I don't know about you. Have you ever just not felt it? I mean, if you can't say yes to that, you should just come up here and share every single talk. But if you just not felt it, have you ever felt inauthentic because you didn't feel it? Or maybe even you've gone through a season of deconstruction. You're like, I don't even know if I believe the things I'm saying as I'm singing. Like, God, you heal. God, you do this. God, you're amazing and glorious. But I don't get why you did this, and I don't get this, and there's all these other question marks. And I'm standing on stage, and I'm saying truth statements that I don't believe in anymore, or whatever, and I'm on a journey myself. There's beauty in this passage because The Spirit that dwells in you can affirm the truth every time without hesitation. When you're redeemed and saved by the King of Kings, he places his Spirit in you, and that Spirit, when the Spirit hears a truth about God, says yes every time, no hesitation, no doubt. That's a part of who you are if you're a follower of Jesus. If you're his, there's this inner man that delights in God's law. There's something that you may not feel that absolutely affirms it. And so in days like that, I can say, all right, I can't quite quantify how that works, but there's a part of who I am because of what you've accomplished that agrees with everything I say. And I'm just going to lean on that. There's passages like the Spirit intercedes on our behalf. There's passages about all of these kinds of things. And so I just lean on that. And by the way, you can shepherd your congregation to do the same thing. I've shared this text with the congregation. For those of you who are just not feeling it today, if you're his, there's a part of who you are that's been transformed that affirms it. So that's helpful on those Sundays when you don't feel it. This goes back to that illustration about seasons. The struggle is part of the point. So when the tension turns up in your ministry and you're feeling like leaving, don't shortchange it. That pressure, that tension, that conflict, that anxiety in you, that's the creative something that's not getting to go out, that's an opportunity for transformation in you and transformation in your ministry. And so pressure, anxiety, tension is not a sign that God is no longer in it. The cross stands in the face of that. Martyrdom stands in the face of that. Those things are actually, sometimes frustratingly so, the tool that God uses to transform us the most. And so instead, you can do a couple different things. And let's see how am I doing on time? I probably can't share that passage. You can say, so when I feel the temperature rising in conflict or a challenge or whatever it may be, you can think of it like your heavenly Father is like a coach who's saying, you're ready for a little more. And you can actually get this weird, like maybe demented joy out of the pressure because you can say, I don't agree with you, by the way, Lord. I don't think I'm ready for more. I don't think I'm ready to handle more pressure and more tension and more growth. But if you think I am, it's actually kind of exciting, even if I disagree. And so, what do you have for me? What do you have for me in this moment? What can I learn from? What else I got? Lead somewhere out of the spotlight. I would encourage everyone to do this, whether you're a sound engineer or whatever. Lead worship for the tiny, itty-bitty women's small group. Lead worship for that prayer group that only 2 people show up to midweek at 6 a.m. Find somewhere that doesn't have lights, that doesn't have backing tracks, that doesn't have the trappings to lead worship, because that's where you started anyway, probably, in your living or in your basement, in your bedroom or whatever, and there's something there that you're able to strip off and be like, that's right, this is why I'm doing this. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone from a space like that, and it's given me the soul food that I need to come back to a stage and continue to lead my congregation faithfully. If you're a sound engineer, mix sound for a memorial service or a wedding. Don't delegate that to the 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th, 8th tier sound guy who you taught how to flip on the switch. Pick a couple of them every year, or one ministry that you do it for, and do it consistently because it'll remind you of the bigger reason why you're doing it. And you can help them in the process. I think this is my final one. Let's see. Yeah. So Dallas Willard, this is a beautiful quote. the main thing you will give your congregation, just like the main thing you will give to God, is the person you are becoming. Let that just wash over you, because that is a freedom. That is an invitation to become a person that God wants you to be. It's an invitation to not fill your entire schedule with task, and instead take a walk and just say, all right, Lord, what do you want for this community this week? What are you saying to me? Why was I angry with so-and-so? What was up with that? That moment of deeply shepherding your own soul in the presence of God will give you dividends that will pay every single circumstance that you're in. It'll make you a better decision maker. It'll make you a better, more gentle leader, or a more bold leader if that's what you need. It will help you balance. Who you are becoming is the most valuable thing that you have to offer your congregation. Gosh, I wish I'd learned this so much sooner. Because it's that kind of mentality that will help you stick through it for the long haul. It's hard to believe sometimes, though, when you're trying to keep up with other things you see, other churches doing fancy things, budgets are tight, and if you could just do something right to attract the right people, to give them more money so that you could buy the camera, or you name it, those things can become trappings. But if you say, all right, I don't get how the dynamic works, but I'm going to care for my soul so constantly and consistently that I exude his desire for this community, his passion for this community. And it'll sustain you through a lot. So longevity aligns you with one of God's standard tools of transformation, patience, and it aligns your ministry with it too. And let me tell you, there's a lot of sorrow that takes place when you stick it out for 10 years, 20 years. I haven't been here 20 years yet, but 10 years. But some of those sorrows I've looked back on, and I can say with such confidence that the end result of that sorrow was something beautiful and good, and it was fruitful. Don't shortchange yourself. If you can stick it out, find a smaller list of reasons why it's a deal breaker. Don't be like the older community. Stay and complain. Stay and renovate the community from the inside out. Don't just, it's getting hard. Okay? Because then you'll miss out on the revivals that come after 100 years of prayer, or the revivals that come after long, excruciating seasons of the dark night of the soul. Stick it out. You won't regret it. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for this group of leaders. I pray that you would give them your heart for people, your patience for people and for themselves. Would you enable them to stay faithful where they are unless you call them? May they never run from sorrow, but instead run towards your calling. And Lord, if there's any shame that they may feel right now from changing places too often or whatever it may be, Lord, will you comfort them there and offer them an invitation to do something different in the future? And if you're calling them away now, give them confidence there too, whatever that may be. But may they follow you and stay consistent with you no matter what happens. I pray these things in your name. Amen. Thanks, everyone.
We would love for you to join us at our next Churchfront Live gathering. Go to churchfrontlive.com to see our schedule of upcoming events and register today.